My boyfriend's mother, Ann Peterson, took me to see the condo they had supposedly just bought for our wedding. When we arrived, I froze. Wasn't this the very same condo I was currently renting out? I turned to my future mother-in-law. Anne, is this really the place you prepared for us as our starter home? I asked. I had always imagined my wedding would be a dignified affair. Both sets of parents would sit down and discuss everything like civilized adults. There would be gifts, blessings. I never thought I'd one day find myself at the center of a drama where I was both the victim and the director, about to drop the final curtain. The pressure to get married had been on me for nearly 3 years. My mom was blunt. "You're not a kid anymore. You're not planning on being single forever, are you?" People would look and say my parents hadn't raised me right. It wasn't that I didn't want to get married. It was just that something always felt missing. That was until I met Dylan. Dylan appeared at the perfect moment, like a meticulously wrapped gift. Handsome, soft-spoken. He claimed to have studied abroad and worked in luxury stone imports. His family, he said, was well off. He was attentive to the smallest details, remembering what I liked to eat, what I was afraid of, and even tying my scarf for me himself in cold weather. For almost 2 years of our relationship, my parents couldn't have been happier. Finally, my mom would say, "Someone who can put up with you." I myself thought that maybe this was it, that I should settle down, until that one evening. I was at work when his mother, Ann Peterson, called. Her voice was unusually cheerful. "Kate, dear, are you free this evening? I want to show you the condo." I was surprised. "What condo?" She chuckled softly. "The wedding gift, of course. You and Dylan have been together for a long time. It's time to think about settling down. His father and I have prepared a little place for you. I'll show you tonight. If there's anything you don't like, you can change it." I was a bit taken aback. We hadn't even officially announced our engagement, and now we were looking at a wedding condo. But I figured they were doing it from the heart, and it would be rude to refuse. I drove to the address she sent me. With every mile, my heart sank a little deeper. This road was painfully familiar. An elite residential complex on the riverfront, strict security. When the GPS announced I had arrived, I looked up at the sign, the Riverwalk, Building 9. My hands went cold. This was the condo I had bought at 24 with the fee from my first major design commission. I had personally chosen every tile, every light fixture. Later, due to frequent business trips, I asked my best friend, Sarah, to manage it as a rental property. The rent, $3,000 each month, was deposited directly into my account. The lease was for 3 years. I had almost forgotten I owned another condo in this city. And now, today, it had become the starter home that Dylan's family had prepared for me. Ann Peterson was standing in the lobby, dressed in an elegant purple dress, her hair perfectly coiffed. Seeing me, she beamed. "There you are, dear. Come on, let's go see it. You're going to love it." I took a deep breath and followed her into the elevator. The doors opened on the 9th floor. I stepped into the familiar hallway and, on reflex, walked toward Unit 901. Anne pulled out a set of keys and, as she unlocked the door, boasted, "We bought this place outright. We put over $50,000 into renovations. Only the best." The door swung open. The scent of a cheap air freshener mixed with the familiar aroma of the hardwood flooring I had once chosen. In the living room stood the same cream-colored sofa, the dark blue armchair by the window, and the molecule-shaped chandelier I had bought back then for nearly $5,000. Every detail was a punch to the gut. This was my condo. I stood motionless. Anne took my arm and led me inside. "Once you're our daughter-in-law, this will be your home." "Mom," I croaked, the word feeling foreign. "Is this really the condo you and Dad bought for Dylan and me?" She laughed loudly. "Of course. The deed is in his father's name, so don't you worry." I walked over to the TV stand and looked at the metal statuette I had bought at an art fair for $2,500. As I reached out to touch it, Anne sharply pulled my hand back. "Oh, be careful. That's a very expensive piece. Don't touch it, you might break it. It would be a huge hassle." I looked at her and smiled bitterly. "If something breaks in our own home, we'll just fix it, right, Mom?" She looked flustered for a moment, then forced a smile. Yes, I just meant it's valuable. We should take care of it. I said nothing more. After leaving the condo, I sat in my car for a long time before calling Sarah. Sarah, who's renting Unit 901 right now? Sarah answered immediately. Some woman, Ann Peterson, been there for 2 years. Says she's getting it ready for her son, who's getting married. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. Is the lease still active? Of course. They pay $3,000 a month, always on time. What's up? I hung up. $3,000 a month. The wedding condo worth millions was my own rental property. That evening, Dylan called, his voice full of anticipation. So, what did you think of the condo? My parents tried really hard. I answered calmly, yes, it's beautiful. I'm so glad you like it. Our families will meet next week to discuss the engagement. Okay. I looked out the window at the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. A plan was slowly forming in my mind. If they were going to put on such an elaborate show, I wasn't going to interrupt it halfway through. I would wait until the audience was as large as possible, and when the curtain rose, everyone would see the truth. I replied to him, yes, I'm looking forward to it. That weekend, Dylan's family came to our house to discuss the engagement. My mom was so happy she booked a table at the most luxurious restaurant in the city. I deliberately chose the most expensive dishes and ordered more wine. I clearly saw Dylan paying the bill in installments through a payment app on his phone. After dinner, my mother announced that as a gift to the young couple, our family was expecting a contribution of $500,000. I saw the color drain from Ann Peterson's face. For truly wealthy people, $500,000 isn't an insurmountable sum. But for someone renting my condo for $3,000 a month, it was a figure that could expose their entire facade. I kept smiling. The show was heading in the right direction. The evening before the engagement party, a young woman named Vicky called me. She said she had been Dylan's girlfriend for 3 years. I wasn't surprised. I already had all the evidence. Photos of Dylan entering bars and hotels with different women. Vicky said she was coming to the engagement party. I replied, please do. On the morning of the party, they brought my family to Unit 901 to see the home for good luck. My relatives were full of praise. What a large and beautiful condo. In the midst of the celebration, Anne's phone rang. She accidentally answered it on speaker. A man's voice filled the room. Mrs. Peterson, you still haven't paid this month's rent. You're 3 days overdue. The atmosphere froze. She stammered, you must have the wrong number. Wrong number? I looked at my parents. Their expressions began to change, but I remained silent. It wasn't time yet. This was only the beginning. The living room of 901 still smelled of fresh flowers and newly opened chocolates, but the air had become as heavy as lead. After the call about the overdue rent, no one said anything out loud, but everyone's glances had shifted. My mother placed her teacup on the table. The light clink of porcelain against glass sounded deafening. She no longer looked at Ann Peterson but turned to me and, maintaining her composure, said, Kate, let's step out onto the balcony for a minute. I nodded. Dylan, standing nearby, lightly touched my elbow as if trying to hold me back, but I walked past him. A strong river breeze was blowing on the balcony. My mom looked at me for a long time before asking quietly, tell me honestly, is something going on? I looked down at the stream of cars below. What do you think, Mom? She was silent. I knew my mom wasn't foolish. She was just wrestling with herself, caught between appearances and her maternal intuition. That phone call didn't sound like a mistake, Mom said slowly. People that wealthy don't have overdue rent. I turned to her. What if I told you this condo is mine? Would you believe me? Mom froze. What are you talking about? I bought it 3 years ago, then asked a friend to manage the rental. The tenant is Ann Peterson. My mother's face turned pale. Kate, don't say such things on a day like this. I'm not. I opened my phone and showed her the digital copy of the lease agreement, the tenant's name, their driver's license details. Look, Mom. Mom's hands trembled as she took the phone. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. A moment later, she handed it back. Her voice was hollow. When did you find out? The day Ann Peterson brought me here to see the wedding condo. Mom closed her eyes and sighed. I saw not only anger in her eyes but also regret. After all, she had been the one pushing me the hardest to get married. She was the one who believed Dylan's family was our equal. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I shook my head. "It's not too late, Mom." We returned to the living room. The atmosphere was still tense. My father sat with his back ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on Dylan. Dylan tried to maintain his composure, smiling and talking to my relatives, but his smile was no longer natural. The home viewing ended in awkwardness, and both families headed to the hotel for the official engagement ceremony. I sat in the car with my parents. We were silent the whole way. When the car stopped at the hotel entrance, my father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Kate, what are you going to do?" I stared straight ahead. "I want them to expose themselves." My father looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "I have faith in you." Just 4 words, but they made my heart ache. The banquet hall was lavishly decorated. Relatives from both sides had gathered. Dylan was in a black suit, his hair perfectly styled. On the surface, he was still the perfect fiancé. The ceremony began. Family representatives gave speeches. Ann Peterson spoke loudly and cheerfully, mentioning the new condo, a stable life, an obedient daughter-in-law. I listened, a coldness spreading through me. When it was time to exchange rings, Dylan took my hand and whispered, "After today, you're my fiancé." I looked at him. "Are you sure?" He froze for a second. "What's wrong with you?" I didn't answer. After the ring exchange, the host suggested we watch a video of our love story. The large screen lit up. The first few photos were just as I'd planned. Pictures of Dylan and me drinking coffee, traveling moments that looked incredibly happy. Everyone smiled. On the 5th slide, the image changed abruptly. On the screen was Dylan, hugging another girl in a bar, the red and purple lights casting shadows on his face. A murmur went through the crowd. Ann Peterson jumped to her feet. "Turn that off. Turn it off immediately." But the next image was already up. Dylan with another girl entering a hotel, then a shot of him kissing Vicky in a car. The hall erupted. Dylan, pale as a ghost, turned to me. "Kate, what are you doing?" I looked at him calmly. "You tell them." "It's a setup," he shouted. "Someone is trying to frame me." Vicky rose from her seat in the audience. She was wearing a red dress, her face pale but her eyes filled with hate. "Dylan, how much longer are you going to lie?" Ann Peterson rushed toward her, trying to pull her away. "Who are you? Don't you dare ruin my son's celebration." Vicky laughed bitterly. "Celebration? We've been together for 3 years. Kate is just a walking wallet to him." The noise grew louder. My father stood up. "Dylan, explain yourself." Dylan looked around, his eyes darting. He dropped to one knee in front of me, his voice breaking. "Kate, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but I truly love you." I leaned down. "Do you love me, or my family's money?" He was stunned. "What are you talking about?" "Unit 901 is mine," I said, articulating each word clearly. "I bought it 3 years ago, and for the last 2 years, your mother has been renting it. The lease is still valid." The entire hall fell silent. Ann Peterson stammered, "You're talking nonsense." I handed my phone to my father. He scanned the screen and turned to Dylan's family. "Ann, what is the meaning of this?" Ann Peterson's face turned deathly white. She couldn't utter a word. Dylan stared at me in disbelief. "You were investigating me? You staged an entire performance to deceive me, and I didn't have the right to know the truth?" He clenched his fists, his tone shifting from pleading to irritated. "You did this to humiliate me." I scoffed. "You destroyed your own reputation." Vicky stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. "So you were lying to me, too." Dylan turned to her and snarled. "Shut up." That one command was enough for everyone to see his true colors. My father stepped forward, his voice firm. "Kate, take off the ring." I looked at the ring on my finger, slowly removed it, and placed it in Dylan's palm. "I'm returning this to you, and you can keep the $500,000 to pay your rent." Dylan stood there, frozen. My mom took my hand. "Let's go, sweetheart." We left the banquet hall under the gaze of hundreds of eyes. Behind us, shouts and arguments were still echoing, but I didn't look back. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. My mom squeezed my hand tightly. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm okay." My father looked at me with pride. My daughter is not so easily broken. I glanced back at the hotel one last time. One story had ended, but its echoes, I knew, had not yet faded. I knew Dylan wouldn't give up so easily. What does a man like that do when cornered? My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "You think this is over?" I smirked. "No, not yet." The message arrived as soon as I got in the car. From an unknown number, no name. It was just one sentence. "You think this is over?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds, and then turned it off without replying. Someone who is truly scared will try to explain themselves. Someone who is cornered will try to counterattack. I knew Dylan was the latter type. The car started moving. My mom sat beside me, still holding my hand. My father drove, his back as straight as a board. No one said anything, but the atmosphere was no longer as heavy as it had been that morning. It felt like the aftermath of a great storm. Things were still a mess, but the sky was beginning to clear. When we got home, my mom closed the door and turned to me. "Kate, tell us everything." I sat down in an armchair and told them everything from the beginning. From the day Ann Peterson took me to Unit 901, to calling Sarah to confirm the lease, and then to hiring a private investigator to look into Dylan. I didn't leave out a single detail. After listening, my father clasped his hands, his voice low. "So you plan to expose him at the engagement party from the start?" "Yes." I looked at my father. I wanted them to incriminate themselves in front of everyone. If I had confronted them privately, they would have denied everything. My mom sighed. "And I was scolding you, even threatening to disown you. It's a good thing you didn't listen to me." I gave a bitter smile. "You just wanted what was best for me." My mom shook her head. Good intentions without clear judgment can turn into a bad thing. I couldn't sleep that night. Not from heartbreak, but from the understanding that this wasn't over. Dylan's and his family's honor had been trampled in front of everyone. People like him don't take humiliation quietly. The next morning, the gossip had spread through all the relatives on both sides. My phone rang nonstop. Some were asking questions, some were curious, some offered sympathy. I kept my answers brief. Everything has been cleared up. In the afternoon, Sarah called, her voice anxious. "Kate, something's happened." "What is it?" "Ann Peterson came by this morning. She said she wants to move out immediately. But that's not all. She's demanding to be reimbursed for renovations. She claims she spent over $50,000 updating the condo." I laughed softly. "What renovations?" "She says she replaced the kitchen, installed new cabinets, repainted the walls." I remembered perfectly that the condo was in pristine condition before I rented it out. If they had changed anything, it was without my permission. "Sarah, what does the lease say?" "It's in there." "Of course. The tenant is not allowed to make structural changes. Any renovations must be approved by the landlord in writing. Then we follow the lease." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Kate, are they going to cause trouble?" "Not yet, but they probably will." That evening, Dylan showed up at the gate of my office building. I had just finished work and saw him standing there. He was wearing a suit, but his face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. I stopped a few feet away. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me, his gaze no longer holding its former tenderness. It was a mix of resentment and pleading. "Kate, let's talk. I think we've said everything." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've backed me into a corner." I looked him straight in the eye. "You chose this path yourself. Do you know I lost my job after that day? The company found out, and they fired me. My partners also terminated their contracts. Are you happy now?" I didn't answer right away. A flicker of doubt crossed my mind, but then I remembered the look in his eyes when he yelled at Vicky, remembered his words about marrying me for gain. "You lost your job because you lived a lie, not because of me." Dylan gritted his teeth. "You think you've won? You humiliated me, but now you have nothing left either. Who's going to marry you now?" I laughed. "Do I need someone to marry me?" He froze. I continued. "You forgot. Unit 901 is mine. My company is still running. My parents are by my side. What have I lost? His face turned red. You're too cruel. Cruel? You mean not letting myself be deceived any longer? He was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly softened his tone. Kate, give me a chance. I was wrong. I can start over. I'll prove to you that I've changed. I looked at the man in front of me and suddenly realized how alien and frightening he was. For 2 years, I believed he was a responsible man. It turned out he was only responsible for his own interests. You don't love me, I said slowly. You love the future I could have given you. Dylan smirked. Who isn't pragmatic these days? You are too. That's right. I am pragmatic. That's why I won't marry a man who views marriage as an investment contract. He couldn't say anything more. His gaze slowly turned cold. You'll regret this, he threw at me. I answered calmly. I already regret ever believing you. That's enough. I walked past him and got into my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing motionless on the crowded sidewalk, his shadow stretching long in the evening sun. That night, my mom sat with me in the living room. Did Dylan find you? She asked. Yes. He lost his job. My mom sighed. Don't you feel sorry for him? I thought for a moment and shook my head. I didn't do anything wrong. My mom looked at me for a long time and then said quietly, I'm just afraid a desperate man is capable of doing desperate things. Her words made me uneasy. Just then, my phone vibrated again. Another message from an unknown number. You think a lease agreement will save you? Take care of Unit 901. My heart clenched. I immediately called Sarah. She didn't pick up. I called again, same thing. A growing sense of dread washed over me. I turned to my parents. I need to go to 901. My father stood up instantly. I'm going with you. The car sped through the night. As we approached, we saw the flashing blue and red lights from a distance. A crowd had gathered near the building. I got out of the car, my heart pounding. A security guard ran up. Are you the owner of Unit 901? I nodded. There was just a small fire in the kitchen. They managed to put it out. I stood frozen. A fire. Only one face came to mind, Dylan. I stood at the base of the Riverwalk with ice-cold palms. The fire truck's lights were off, leaving only a few security guards and curious residents whispering among themselves. A faint smell of smoke still lingered in the air. My father stood beside me, his hand on my back as if afraid I might fall. He didn't ask any questions, but I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. A guard escorted us to the 9th floor. The hallway outside 901 reeked of smoke. The apartment door was ajar, the lights on inside. Sarah was standing in the middle of the living room, her hair disheveled and her eyes red. When she saw me, she rushed over. Kate, thank God you're here. How did the fire start? I asked, trying to stay calm. Sarah swallowed hard. There was a gas leak from the stove. The flames caught on the wooden cabinet above it. The neighbors saw smoke and called security. They put it out in time. I walked into the kitchen. The wall was covered in black soot. The wooden cabinet was charred. A small crack had appeared on the stone countertop. The fire hadn't been large, but it had left its mark. I bent down and looked at the gas valve. It was loose. Did anyone come into the apartment before the fire? I asked Sarah. Sarah shook her head. Ann Peterson came by this morning to get her things, but I had the keys. I let her in, and then she left. What time did she leave? Around 3 p.m. I looked at my watch. It was almost 10 p.m. There had been plenty of time. My father, standing nearby, frowned. Kate, do you think? I didn't answer, but the message, take care of Unit 901, flashed clearly in my mind. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Dylan. I stared at the screen for a few seconds and answered, Do you have something to say? His voice on the other end was no longer as sharp as it had been that afternoon. It was quieter, as if he were holding back. Are you at 901 right now? Yes. I gripped the phone tighter. Do you know what happened? He let out a low laugh. A chill ran down my spine. I just wanted to remind you that apartments can catch fire easily, especially when the gas lines are old. I stared directly at the gas valve in front of me. Are you threatening me? I'm just worried about you, he drawled. If you don't let me live, who knows what could happen? My father overheard snippets of the conversation. He gestured for me to put it on speaker. I complied. Dylan, my father said, his voice calm but authoritative. What did you just say? There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. I didn't say anything wrong, Dylan replied, but with less confidence. My father spoke slowly. If anything happens to my daughter's property, I will see this through to the very end. Do you understand me? The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hands shaking slightly not from fear, but from the realization that this had gone far beyond a failed relationship. Sarah took my hand. Kate, was that Dylan? I didn't confirm, only said, Sarah, tomorrow, help me change the locks and install cameras everywhere. My father nodded. And file a police report. I hesitated for a moment. If we reported it, things would get even more serious. But if we didn't, Dylan would think I was scared. Report it, I said decisively. We went downstairs to talk to security and file an incident report. Thankfully, no one was hurt. The damage was minimal, but in my heart, the last shred of trust in Dylan had crumbled. I got home very late that night. My mom was still waiting in the living room. Seeing me, she showered me with questions. What happened? It's okay. They put it out in time. No one was hurt. My mom sighed in relief, then looked at me with anxiety. It was him, wasn't it? I sat down next to her, resting my head on her shoulder like when I was a child. I don't have proof, but you know, my mom was silent, then said quietly, Kate, you're strong, but I'm still your mother. I'm scared. I took her hand. I'm scared too, but I can't back down. The next morning, a patrol officer came to Unit 901 to investigate. They noted signs that the gas valve had been intentionally loosened, but there wasn't enough evidence to open a criminal case. I didn't mention Dylan's name, only provided the threatening text message. That afternoon, Ann Peterson showed up at our house. She was wearing simple clothes, a far cry from the luxury she displayed on the day of the engagement party. Seeing me, she fell to her knees at our gate. Kate, I'm begging you. Drop the charges. I froze. I didn't press charges against anyone. But the police came to our house. They questioned us. The neighbors are gossiping. I'm ashamed to look people in the eye. My mom came out of the house, watching the scene in silence. Anne looked up at me, her eyes red from crying. Dylan did a stupid thing, but he's not evil enough to be a murderer. Forgive him this one time. I'll take him far away. I looked at the woman who had once proudly shown off my condo as a wedding gift. Now she was kneeling before me, without a trace of her former arrogance. Anne, I said slowly, if the fire yesterday had been a little stronger, the whole building could have been in danger. Did you think about that? She lowered her head. I know, we were wrong. And do you know what your biggest mistake was from the very beginning? I asked. She was silent. It wasn't that you rented the apartment. It was that you treated me like an investment. You and Dylan thought you could use marriage for financial gain. Anne trembled. I just wanted my son to have a future. A future built on lies is never stable. There was a long pause. My mother walked over and gently helped Anne to her feet. Go home. What will be, will be. Anne gave me one last look, a mixture of reproach and pleading, and then left without another word. That evening, Dylan didn't call or text, but I knew he hadn't given up. People like him, when they're losing, try to flip the entire board. I stood by the window, looking at the familiar street. There was no longer anger in my heart, only a cold, clear realization. If he wanted to continue the game, I wouldn't back down. But this time, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting my family. After Ann Peterson knelt at our gate, things seemed to quiet down on the surface. Dylan stopped calling and texting. We changed the locks at Unit 901 and installed cameras inside and out. A patrol officer would stop by occasionally to ask a few follow-up questions, but since the damage was minor, the case was temporarily classified as an incident pending further investigation. But I understood that a calm surface didn't mean peace. 3 days later, an anonymous complaint was sent to the management at my company. It accused me of using personal connections to manipulate contracts and of financial opacity. I didn't have to guess who was behind it. My director called me into his office. He was a man in his 50s, calm, who had seen more corporate battles than I could imagine. "Kate, have you had any personal conflicts recently?" he asked directly. I looked at him without flinching. "I have, and this person is trying to put pressure on me." He nodded. "I've read your file since your first day here. Your achievements speak for themselves. This anonymous letter has no concrete evidence. But be careful." I thanked him. Leaving his office, I realized Dylan had shifted tactics. No more direct confrontation, but an attack on my reputation and career. That evening, I told my parents about it. My mom sighed. "He's truly desperate." My father thought for a moment and said, "Kate, are you going to sue him?" I shook my head. "I don't have enough evidence for the fire, and I'll handle the slander at work internally." My father looked at me intently. "I don't want you getting involved in his dirty games, but if it comes to it, I will step in." I knew he meant it. He was a professor, a man who had spent his life teaching people to live honestly. He detested murky situations like the one with Dylan. I smiled. "I'm not alone, Dad." The next day, Vicky unexpectedly contacted me. She wanted to meet at a small, quiet cafe. Vicky was already there when I arrived. She wasn't wearing the bright makeup she had on at the hotel. She looked at me, her gaze holding no hatred, only exhaustion. "Kate, I'm sorry," she said as soon as I sat down. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. "For what I said that day, about you being a wallet for him." Vicky lowered her head. "I was just a pawn, too." I looked at the young woman before me. Once she had appeared as a home wrecker. Now, she was just another betrayed woman. "Why did you want to see me?" Vicky took a deep breath. "Dylan is in a lot of debt." I froze. After he was fired, he owed money to a lot of people for the engagement party, for gifts, for rent, for some old investments. I heard him say he needed money urgently, or he'd lose everything. I frowned. "Do you know what he's planning to do?" Vicky shook her head. "I only know that a few days ago, some men came to his house to collect a debt. They were shouting very loudly. A sense of alarm washed over me. What would a man like Dylan do under financial pressure? "Are you still in touch with him?" I asked. Vicky shook her head. "I've blocked him everywhere. But you should be careful." I thanked Vicky and left. On the way home, my mind was a jumble. If Dylan was truly in debt, the chances of him trying to pressure me again were very high. That evening, as I pulled up to my house, an unfamiliar car was parked at the gate. 3 men were sitting inside. Their gazes were probing. My father stepped out, shielding me. "Are you looking for someone?" One of them opened the door and got out. "We need to see Kate." I stepped forward. "That's me." The man looked me up and down. "What's your relationship with Dylan?" I knew immediately. "None." He smirked. "That's not what we heard. We heard you were about to get married." He borrowed money. Said it was for a wedding to a rich fiancé. I felt my heart start to race. His affairs have nothing to do with me. The man took a step closer. "Nothing to do with you?" He put your name down on the loan agreement. A cold chill ran down my spine. "That's impossible," I said firmly. "We don't care. If he doesn't pay, we come after the people connected to him." My father stepped forward, his voice stern. "Do you have any documents proving my daughter's involvement? If not, I suggest you leave." The man looked at my father, then at me, his gaze calculating. Finally, he waved his companions back into the car. The car drove off, but it left behind a sense of dread I had never felt before. I went inside, my hands still shaking slightly. My mom put her hands on my shoulders. "Kate, this is getting dangerous." I sat down, breathing deeply. "He put my name on a loan agreement. It could be a forgery," my father said immediately. "Tomorrow, you're going to the police. We can't let this go any further." I nodded. This was no longer about feelings or reputation. It was about the law. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying the entire chain of events. From Unit 901 to the engagement party, the fire, the anonymous complaint, and now the debts. Dylan wasn't just a liar. He was a man willing to drag others down with him as he drowned. I opened my phone and sent him a single message. "You put my name on a loan agreement. It was almost 10 minutes before he replied. I had no other choice. I reread the sentence several times. No other choice. I typed a reply. You are destroying yourself. The message was sent. There was no response. I put my phone down and went out onto the balcony. The night air was cool. There was no longer anger in my heart, only a clear resolve. I had given him a chance to walk away quietly, but he had chosen to pull me into his vortex. Fine. This time, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would end this, using the full force of the law. The next morning, my father and I went to the police station. The sun was shining, but I felt a chill in my soul, like after a long rain. I brought all the text messages from Dylan, a copy of the lease for Unit 901, and even the recording of the phone call from the night of the fire, which my father had managed to save. An officer in his 40s, with a very calm voice, took my statement. He listened to my story from beginning to end without interruption. You're saying this man put your name on a loan agreement? He asked. Yes. Last night, 3 men came to our house and said Dylan had borrowed money for a wedding to a rich fiancé, and he had used my name. He nodded. If there are signs of a forged signature or illegal use of personal data, that's a crime. File a report, and we'll investigate. I looked at my father. He gave a slight nod. I signed the report, and my hand didn't tremble. This felt very different from taking off the ring and giving it back to Dylan. That had been about emotions. Today was about the line between right and wrong. When we left the station, my father said quietly, Kate, you did the right thing. I looked at him. Dad, are you disappointed? That I chose the wrong person? My father smiled gently. Anyone can make a mistake in judgment. The important thing is to stop it in time. That afternoon, I was called back to the station to give a supplementary statement. They had contacted one of the 3 men who had come to our house. They confirmed that Dylan had borrowed money from them and had provided a copy of my driver's license as a guarantor. Hearing this, my breath caught. Only Dylan had a copy of my license from when we were making wedding arrangements. The officer asked, Did you co-sign any loans? No, I said firmly. Then it's most likely a forgery. We'll be calling Dylan in for questioning. I left the office with a heavy heart. Not from fear, but from pain. I had thought that no matter how wrong Dylan was, he had some last shred of decency. But using my documents to secure a loan showed he was willing to drag me into legal trouble. That evening, my phone rang. It was Ann Peterson. I hesitated for a few seconds but answered. Kate. Her voice was hoarse. Dylan was called in by the police. I know. She was silent for a moment, then said, You're being too cruel. I scoffed. And you think forging my documents is normal? Dylan said he had no other choice. He was desperate. If you can't show compassion, why are you trying to drown him? Anne, I kept my tone calm. If I hadn't cleared this up, they would be coming to me for the money tomorrow. Would you have paid it for me? Silence on the other end. I once called you Mom, I continued. I thought I was going to be your daughter-in-law, but you and Dylan treated me like a tool. Her voice grew quieter. I just wanted to save our family's face. I wanted to save my family's face, too. The conversation ended in a heavy silence. 2 days later, Dylan came to our house again. This time, he wasn't in a suit. His hair wasn't styled. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. My father opened the gate and stood in the doorway. What do you want here? He asked. I want to see Kate, Dylan answered hoarsely. I came out. If you have something to say it now. Dylan looked at me, his gaze a mixture of exhaustion and anger. Will you drop the report? Do you want me to go to jail? I want the truth to be established. Dylan laughed bitterly. You've won. You have everything. And I've lost everything. I looked at him. He had lost it because he chose this life. I just wanted a better life, he exploded. You were born into better circumstances. You have money, a condo. I had to fight for everything. I froze for a few seconds. For the first time, he was saying what he truly felt deep down. I never looked down on you, I said slowly, but you humiliated yourself when you decided to use marriage to get money. Dylan looked at me, his expression suddenly softening. If you hadn't made a scene that day, everything would have been different. Different how? I would have married you, and a few years later, I'd find out how many other girlfriends you had, or discover I was paying off your debts. He was silent. You said I was cruel, I continued. But do you know what's truly cruel? Making someone believe in you, and then exploiting their trust. The evening breeze blew through the yard. The space between us felt as heavy as a stone. Dylan lowered his head. I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long time. That apology came far too late. You should be apologizing to your parents and taking responsibility for yourself. My father spoke up. Leave. And don't come back here again. Dylan turned and walked away with a heavy gait. I felt no pity, only a sense that an old chapter was closing at a price he himself had paid. A week later, the police concluded there was evidence of signature forgery and illegal use of personal data. Dylan was forced to sign an agreement to pay restitution and repay the loans by a set deadline. Otherwise, the case would proceed. I received an official notification, and my heart felt a little lighter, not because he was in trouble, but because I was no longer in a state of suspense between risk and anxiety. That evening, my mom sat with me on the sofa. Are you still upset? She asked. I thought for a moment and shook my head. I just feel bad about the last 2 years. My mom stroked my hair. Those 2 years taught you a lesson, and that's better than a lifetime of deceit. I leaned against her shoulder. Outside, the city lights were coming on. The kitchen at Unit 901 had been repaired. The cameras were installed. My job was stable. My family was by my side. Dylan may have lost a lot, but it was the consequence of his own choices. I looked into the distance. There was no more fear in my heart, because this time, I hadn't just saved my condo. I had saved myself. After Ann Peterson knelt at our house, things seemed to quiet down on the surface. Dylan no longer called or texted. We had changed the locks at Unit 901 and installed cameras inside and out. A patrol officer would occasionally stop by with follow-up questions, but since the damage was minor, the case was temporarily classified as an incident pending further investigation. But I understood that a calm surface didn't mean peace. 3 days later, an anonymous complaint was sent to the management at my company, accusing me of using personal connections to manipulate contracts and financial opacity. I didn't have to guess who was behind it. My director called me into his office. He was a calm man in his 50s who had seen more corporate battles than I could imagine. Kate, have you had any personal conflicts recently? He asked directly. I looked at him without flinching. I have, and this person is trying to put pressure on me. He nodded. I've read your file since your first day here. Your achievements speak for themselves. This anonymous letter has no concrete evidence, but be careful. I thanked him. Leaving his office, I realized Dylan had shifted tactics. No more direct confrontation, but an attack on my reputation and career. That evening, I told my parents. My mom sighed. He's truly desperate. My father thought for a moment and said, Kate, are you going to sue him? I shook my head. I don't have enough evidence for the fire, and I'll handle the slander at work internally. My father looked at me intently. I don't want you getting involved in his dirty games, but if it comes to it, I will step in. I knew he meant it. He was a professor who had spent his life teaching people to live honestly. He detested murky situations like Dylan's. I smiled. I'm not alone, Dad. The next day, Vicky unexpectedly contacted me. She wanted to meet at a small, quiet cafe. Vicky was already there, her face devoid of the bright makeup she wore at the hotel. Her gaze held no hatred, only exhaustion. Kate, I'm sorry, she said as soon as I sat down. For what I said that day, about you being a wallet for him. Vicky lowered her head. I was just a pawn, too. I looked at the young woman before me, once a homewrecker, now just another betrayed woman. Why did you want to see me? Vicky took a deep breath. Dylan is in a lot of debt. I froze. After he was fired, he owed money to a lot of people for the engagement party, for gifts, for rent, for some old investments. I heard him say he needed money urgently, or he'd lose everything. I frowned. Do you know what he's planning to do? Vicky shook her head. I only know that a few days ago, some men came to his house to collect a debt. They were shouting very loudly. A sense of alarm washed over me. What would a man like Dylan do under financial pressure? Are you still in touch with him? I asked. Vicky shook her head. I've blocked him everywhere, but you should be careful. I thanked Vicky and left. On the way home, my mind was a jumble. If Dylan was truly in debt, the chances of him trying to pressure me again were very high. That evening, as I pulled up to my house, an unfamiliar car was parked at the gate. 3 men were sitting inside, their gazes probing. My father stepped out, shielding me. Are you looking for someone? One of them got out. We need to see Kate. I stepped forward. That's me. The man looked me up and down. What's your relationship with Dylan? I knew immediately. None. He smirked. That's not what we heard. We heard you were about to get married. He borrowed money, said it was for a wedding to a rich fiancé. I felt my heart start to race. His affairs have nothing to do with me. The man took a step closer. Nothing to do with you? He put your name down on the loan agreement. A cold chill ran down my spine. That's impossible, I said firmly. We don't care. If he doesn't pay, we come after the people connected to him. My father stepped forward, his voice stern. Do you have any documents proving my daughter's involvement? If not, I suggest you leave. The man looked at my father, then at me, his gaze calculating. Finally, he waved his companions back into the car, and they drove off, leaving behind a sense of dread I had never felt before. I went inside, my hands still shaking slightly. My mom put her hands on my shoulders. Kate, this is getting dangerous. I sat down, breathing deeply. He put my name on a loan agreement. It could be a forgery, my father said immediately. Tomorrow, you're going to the police. We can't let this go any further. I nodded. This was no longer about feelings or reputation. It was about the law. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying the entire chain of events. From Unit 901 to the engagement party, the fire, the anonymous complaint, and now the debts. Dylan wasn't just a liar. He was a man willing to drag others down with him as he drowned. I opened my phone and sent him a single message. You put my name on a loan agreement. It was almost 10 minutes before he replied. I had no other choice. I reread the sentence several times. No other choice. I typed a reply. You are destroying yourself. The message was sent. There was no response. I put my phone down and went out onto the balcony. The night air was cool. There was no longer anger in my heart, only a clear resolve. I had given him a chance to walk away quietly, but he had chosen to pull me into his vortex. Fine. This time, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would end this, using the full force of the law. After the incident with the paint at 901, I decided not to leave the apartment empty for a single day. Sarah posted a rental listing, carefully screening potential tenants. I insisted on an even stricter lease than before, with clear clauses on liability and security. 3 days later, a young couple came to see the apartment. The husband, Michael, was a structural engineer. His wife, Lana, was a kindergarten teacher. They said they were looking for a long-term rental, as they were expecting their first child. I stood in the newly repaired kitchen, watching them quietly discuss where to put a small crib. A strange feeling washed over me. This apartment was supposed to be the start of my family life. Now, it would be a nest for another. Michael asked me, Kate, do you have any special requirements? I looked around and shook my head. Just that you treat it as your own. Lana smiled. We'll be very careful. I signed the lease the same day. When they moved in, the hallway of 901 no longer smelled of paint or smoke. The sound of the young couple's laughter and conversation softened the space. I thought that maybe, finally, things were coming to an end. But that evening, I got a call from Dylan's number. I didn't answer. The call came again, a second time, then a third. Finally, I picked up. What do you want? Dylan's voice on the other end was tired, without its former edge. I have to sell the house soon. I was silent. My parents don't have enough money to cover the debts. They're taking the house. I looked out at the balcony. The streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt after the rain. Why are you calling me? I want to meet you one more time. The last time. I was about to refuse, but then I agreed. Not because of any lingering feelings, but because I wanted to see the finale with my own eyes. We met at the same old cafe where we had our first date. Dylan was already there. He had lost a lot of weight. His shirt hung off his shoulders. The old confidence was gone from his eyes. "You came," he said quietly. "I came to hear what you have to say." He lowered his head for a moment, then said, "I was wrong." I didn't respond. I thought I could use marriage to change my life. I thought if I married you, everything would work out. I didn't consider the consequences. "You didn't consider them because you didn't see me as a person," I said bluntly. Dylan looked up at me. "I really did like you. Once." "Once?" I repeated. He smiled sadly. "I guess so. But I was too greedy." I looked at the man before me, remembering the guy who stood outside 901, boasting about their wedding condo. The difference between the two images was vast. "You didn't ask me here to say this," I said. Dylan took a deep breath. "I want to ask you for help." I smirked. "What kind of help?" "Lend me some money." The words didn't surprise me, but they still sent a chill through my heart. "Do you realize what you're asking?" I said. "I have no other choice," Dylan replied. "I'll sign a note at any interest rate." I shook my head. "You still don't get it." "Get what?" "You think your problem is a lack of money, but it's not. Your problem is the way you live." Dylan was silent. "I could give you money," I said slowly. "But what then? You'd find another way to get more, faster. You won't change." He looked at me with desperation in his eyes. "Then what do you want from me?" "For you to take responsibility for yourself." A long pause followed, broken only by the hum of the coffee machine behind the counter. "You don't have a shred of sympathy left, do you?" Dylan asked quietly. "My sympathy ran out when you used my documents to take out a loan." He lowered his head, clenching his hands tightly. "I didn't expect you to be this hard." "I'm not hard," I replied. "I've just learned my lesson." Dylan raised his head. "If you had just kept quiet that day and married me, maybe I would have been different." I looked him straight in the eye. If I had kept quiet that day, I would have betrayed myself. Those words were the final punctuation. Dylan sat for a little longer, then stood up. "I won't bother you anymore." I didn't stop him. As he walked past, I suddenly asked, "Do you regret it?" He stopped without turning around. "Yes, but it's too late." I watched his back as he slowly, heavily walked out of the cafe. That evening, when I got home, my mom was watching TV. "Did you see him?" she asked. "What did he say?" "He asked for money." My mom sighed. "You refused?" I nodded. "Good." My father came out of his room and put a hand on my shoulder. "Kate, I have faith in you." I smiled. "I'm not angry anymore. I just feel sorry for the person I used to be." My mom looked at me, her gaze softening. "You've grown up." That night, I slept very soundly. The next morning, Sarah sent me a text. "Kate, Michael, and Lana are inviting you to their housewarming today." I read the message, and a warmth spread through my chest. Unit 901 was no longer a place that reminded me of betrayal. It had become a place for a new family to begin. I replied, "I'll be there this evening." Perhaps the real ending is not when someone leaves, but when you no longer let them affect you. But deep down, I still wondered, had Dylan truly walked out of my life? As promised, I went to Unit 901 that evening at Michael and Lana's invitation. As soon as the door opened, the fragrant smell of soup and fried fish filled the hallway. Lana smiled radiantly. "Kate, come in. It's a bit of a mess. We just finished moving things." I stepped inside and looked around the familiar room. The cream-colored sofa I had once chosen was still there, but a small vase of flowers sat on the table, and by the window, a sweet wooden crib. The feeling of alienation I'd felt before was replaced by warmth. Michael poured me a glass of water. "We're so grateful you rented the apartment to us. It's so hard to find a nice place like this now." I smiled. "As long as you take care of it, I'm happy." Dinner was simple, but filled with laughter. Lana talked about her work at the kindergarten, Michael about a new construction project. They didn't know the history behind the apartment, and I had no intention of mentioning it. As I was leaving, I lingered on the balcony for a moment. Looking at the stream of cars below, I suddenly realized how far I had come. From the girl stunned to find her wedding condo was her own, to the woman who bravely faced legal troubles, debts, and threatening phone calls. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning at work, my mom called. "Kate, come home immediately." Her voice wasn't trembling, but it was unusually hollow. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Ann Peterson just called." I froze. "What did she say?" My mom paused for a few seconds, then answered, "Dylan is in the hospital." I stood frozen in the middle of my office. In the hospital? Why? "I don't know." She was just crying. I left work early. The drive home was a blur. Not because I still loved him, but because the name Dylan was still tied to a part of my life. When I got home, my mom was already waiting. "I'm not saying you have to go," she said, "but I think you should know." I sat down. "What happened to him?" "I heard the debt collectors beat him up." "A head injury." I closed my eyes. The scenes of debt, the paint-splattered door, the threatening phone calls, all came rushing back. I wasn't surprised, just felt a vague sadness. That afternoon, Ann Peterson came to our house. This time, there were no tears, just exhaustion and empty eyes. "Kate," she called out softly. I opened the door and let her in. "Dylan's in the hospital," she said in a hoarse voice. "He was beaten up for a late payment." I was silent. "I'm not asking you for money," she added hastily. "I just don't want you to think he's completely lost. He's at fault, but he doesn't deserve this." I looked at her. "What do you want me to do?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I'm just so ashamed." My mother, sitting nearby, gently asked, "Anne, what are those people demanding now?" "They've given him another month," she replied. "If he doesn't pay the full amount, they'll sue." I sighed. "Did Dylan say anything?" "No," she shook her head. "He just told me not to look for you." Those words made me pause. "He said that?" "Yes," she nodded. "He said it's all his fault and has nothing to do with you anymore." I was silent for a long time. Of all Dylan's wrongdoings, this was perhaps the first time he had chosen not to drag me down with him. Anne stood up. "I should go. I won't bother you anymore." I walked her to the door with a heavy heart. That evening, I sat alone in my room, remembering our last meeting at the cafe. Dylan had asked if I had any sympathy left. I had answered with a firm no. Now, with him lying in a hospital bed, I asked myself the same question. I didn't love him anymore. But I didn't want to see the man I once trusted hit rock bottom. I called Vicky. "Do you know which hospital Dylan is in?" Vicky was silent for a few seconds. "What are you planning to do?" "I just want to know." Vicky sighed. "He's at County General. But don't let him take advantage of your pity." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. That night, I stood outside the hospital for a long time. The white light pouring from the windows of the patient rooms made the space feel cold. I didn't go in. I went home, not because I was heartless, but because I knew that if I walked in now, the lines would blur. I had chosen to stay out of his vortex, and I had to stick with that choice. The next morning, I received a text from Dylan's number. "I'm sorry." Just 2 words. I reread them several times and put the phone down. Some apologies aren't meant to fix things, but to provide closure. I didn't reply. In the afternoon, I stopped by Unit 901. Lana was hanging new curtains. Michael, seeing me, smiled. "Kate, come on in." I entered. The apartment felt brighter. The young couple's laughter filled the space that had seen so much turmoil. I suddenly realized that life always moves on. One door closes, so another can open. And this time, I was moving forward, without Dylan's shadow, but knowing there was still a long road ahead. After the "I'm sorry" text, Dylan didn't contact me again. I didn't reply. Those 2 words remained in my inbox like an unfinished sentence, but I had no desire to continue it. A few days later, Ann Peterson called my mother again. This time, her voice held no tears, only exhaustion. "Dylan's been discharged," she said, "but he'll need more treatment." My mom, listening, looked at me and put the phone on speaker. "How is he, Anne?" my mom asked. "He has a mild concussion, a few stitches." "Those people don't want to escalate things to a serious legal matter either," she replied. I listened in silence. "Is Kate there?" she asked quietly. I'm listening, I said. She paused for a few seconds. He asked me to tell you that he'll handle the debts himself and won't look for you anymore. I didn't know whether to feel relief or emptiness. Okay, I said curtly. The conversation ended. My mom looked at me for a long time. You don't want to visit him, she asked. I shook my head. I already stood outside the hospital. That was enough. My mom nodded. Then it's enough. The following days were calmer. I was busy with a new project at work. I became more focused, pouring myself into every blueprint, every calculation. In rare, free moments, memories would surface, but they were no longer as sharp. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Kate? The voice was a middle-aged man's. Yes? I'm Dylan's uncle. I froze. Has something happened? I'd like to meet with you, just for a little while. Not to blame you, he said quickly, as if afraid I would refuse. I hesitated for a few seconds, then agreed. Not because I was still attached, but because I wanted to hear another perspective. We met at a small tea shop near his house. He was in his 50s, thin, with kind but tired eyes. Thank you for coming, he began. Go on, he sighed. I'm not defending Dylan. He's at fault, I know. But our family isn't as well off as you thought. The house he boasted about is actually mortgaged. I was silent. He's had insecurities since he was a kid. Seeing his friends succeed, he was in a hurry to live. When he met you, he thought it was his chance, he said slowly. A chance for what? I asked. To get rid of his own feelings of inadequacy. I looked at the teacup in front of me, the steam blurring my vision, but the way he chose was wrong. I know, he said, and he's paying for it now. There was a pause. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just hope you won't hold a grudge against him. I looked up at him. I don't hold a grudge. I just can't go back. He nodded, a look of relief in his eyes. You're a strong young woman, he said. Maybe that's why he both loved and feared you. Those words gave me a lot to think about. That evening, I sat with my parents in the living room. My father was reading the paper. My mom was knitting. What did his uncle say? My father asked. I recounted the conversation. My father put down the paper. Insecurities are no excuse for bad behavior, but not everyone has the strength to overcome them. My mom added, True. I looked at them and suddenly realized how lucky I was to have a family that had always taught me to face the truth, not run from it. A few weeks later, Sarah told me that Dylan was selling his only remaining car. I just replied, I see, with neither joy nor sadness. One late evening, as I was getting ready to leave work, Dylan appeared at the entrance. This time, he didn't try to keep his distance or act confrontational. I just wanted to say one thing, he began. I'm listening. I sold the car. I'm looking for another job. I might move to a different state. I nodded. I don't expect your forgiveness, he continued. I just want you to know that I won't bother you anymore. I looked at him, trying to find a hint of blame in his eyes, but saw only exhaustion. You should live an honest life, I said. I'm trying, he replied. We stood there for a few seconds. There was no more anger, no more hope, just two people who had once walked the same path and had now diverged. Goodbye, he said. Goodbye, I replied. He turned and left. This time, I didn't watch him go for too long. That evening, I stopped by 901 again. Lana was sitting and folding baby clothes. Michael was installing a new bookshelf. Kate, will you have dinner with us? Lana asked. I smiled, just for a little while. Sitting in that room, I suddenly understood the lesson I had learned from all of this. Marriage isn't a lottery ticket. Money isn't the foundation of peace. And love without respect becomes a burden. I left 901 after dark. Standing by the entrance, I looked up at the familiar balcony. A warm yellow light poured from the windows of the 9th-floor apartment. There are places that no longer belong to you, but leave a lesson behind. And I had finally stepped out of the shadow of one mistake. After that last meeting outside my office, I never saw Dylan again. No calls, no texts, no chance encounters. It was all truly receding into the past, like a movie I had already seen. But life isn't a movie. It doesn't end when a character walks away. It continues in the most ordinary things. One morning, my mom called me to breakfast earlier than usual. On the table was a bowl of hot oatmeal and a small card. "Read it," my mom said. I picked it up. It was an invitation to the wedding of an old friend's daughter. In the corner, my mom had written, "Go, have some fun." I looked at my mom. "Are you worried I have trauma about marriage now?" My mom smiled. "I'm worried that one bad experience will make you close off your heart." I sighed softly. "I'm not closing it, I'm just opening it more slowly." My father came out of his room, adjusting his glasses. Slower means safer. Those words stayed with me all day. At work, I was put in charge of a major project. My director called me into his office. "Kate, this project is very important. I need a clear-headed person who won't let personal problems affect their work." I nodded. "I understand." Leaving his office, I felt a shift in myself. There was no longer a nervous need to prove something, no feeling of resentment. I just wanted to do my job well. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, a text came from an unknown number. "This is one of Dylan's creditors. You don't need to worry anymore. He's paid off a portion of the debt." I stared at the words for a long time, not with fear, but with surprise. I didn't reply. 2 days later, Ann Peterson called. "Kate, I just wanted to let you know that Dylan is leaving for a construction job in the Midwest soon." "I know," I replied. "He asked me to tell you that he's grateful you didn't push him to the absolute edge." I froze. "I only did what I had to do." "I understand," she said quietly. "If there were a next life, I would want to be the mother of a daughter like you." I paused for a few seconds and replied, "Don't say that, Anne. Everyone has their own path." The conversation ended. I stood by the window, looking at the dark sky. Some people come into your life to teach you a lesson. Dylan was one of them. One weekend, I went to the wedding with my mom. Watching the bride in her white dress, her eyes shining, I no longer felt a pang of envy. My mom leaned over to me. "So, what do you think?" "It's nice," I replied. "Happiness exists." My mom smiled. On the way home, my father asked, "If you meet someone else one day, will you be hesitant?" I thought for a moment and said, "I won't be hesitant, but I won't be rushed." My father nodded. "That's enough." A few weeks later, Sarah shared some happy news. Lana was pregnant. "She asked me to thank you," Sarah said. "She says the apartment brought them good luck." I laughed. "It's not the apartment that brings good luck. It's the people." That evening, I stopped by 901 with a basket of fruit. Lana opened the door, her face glowing. "Kate, come in." I looked around the apartment and saw their wedding photos hanging on the wall. A pot with a small green plant stood in the corner of the living room. "Michael says this place has good energy," Lana said. I smiled. "Maybe because you cherish it." Sitting in that room, I remembered the day Ann Peterson brought me here, boasting about the wedding condo. I remembered my shock, my anger, and then my resolve. If I hadn't stayed calm that day, hadn't verified everything, I might have entered into a disastrous marriage. On the way home, I asked myself if I regretted anything. No, I only regretted that I had believed so quickly. But trusting is not a mistake. The mistake is when it's exploited. One late evening at work, Dylan sent a text unexpectedly. "I'm on the train. Leaving tomorrow morning." I read it and put my phone down. After a while, I texted back, "Safe travels." The message was sent. There was no reply. I wasn't expecting one. That night, I slept very deeply. The next morning, I woke up early, made myself a coffee, and stood on the balcony, watching the sun rise. My life was here. My parents were here. My work was waiting for me. Dylan was gone, taking his mistakes and his lessons with him. And I was no longer that naive girl standing in front of a wedding condo. I was a woman who knew her own worth. But I also knew there was still a lot of unknown ahead, and I was ready to embrace it. After the safe travels text, Dylan did not reply. I wasn't waiting for one. Some goodbyes aren't for reunions, but for silently escorting someone out of your life. In the following days, I was busier than ever. The new project was in its final stages, and I was staying late at the office almost every night. Each time I came home to a plate of hot soup my mom had left for me and my dad waiting up with the newspaper, I felt a deep sense of peace. One evening, as soon as I walked in, my mom called out, "Kate, come here." On the table was a plain, white envelope with no return address. "Someone gave this to your father this afternoon," my mom said. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, "Kate, I've left the city. This construction job could take a few years. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness. I just want to say that I understand why you did what you did. If I had known when to stop that day, maybe things would have been different. Thank you for once believing in me, Dylan." I read the letter, folded it, and put it back in the envelope. My mom looked at me curiously. "How are you?" I sighed softly. "There's nothing left, Mom." My father came out of his room, having overheard parts of the conversation. "He's gone, and that's for the best," he said. "Everyone has their own path." I nodded. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying everything that had happened since Ann Peterson first took me to 901. Every detail resurfaced. Dylan's confident look when he talked about the wedding condo, the call about the rent, the photos on the screen at the party, the smell of gas, the red paint on the door. I realized I had been through a journey that, if told to others, would sound like a dramatic plot. But for me, it was a lesson in trust and personal boundaries. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't even considered before. I went to the bank and filled out the paperwork to transfer the title of Unit 901 into joint ownership with my parents. When I got home, I gave them the documents. "Mom, Dad, from now on, 901 isn't just mine." My mom was surprised. "What are you doing?" "Property isn't as important as the people you love," I replied. "I don't want to carry everything alone. I want us to own this together, as a family." My father looked at me for a long time, then said, "You've really grown up." I smiled. "I just realized that without you, I wouldn't have had the clarity to stop." My mom took my hand. "A family is a place where you can find support, not a place where you have to carry everything by yourself." That evening, I stopped by 901. Lana was sitting and sewing a tiny onesie for the baby. Michael had just gotten home from work, blueprints in hand. "Kate, good news?" Lana asked. "I just put the condo in joint ownership with my parents," I said. Lana smiled. "That's even more secure." I looked around the room. The warm yellow light, the steady hum of a fan, the smell of a freshly cooked dinner. There was no trace left of those turbulent days. On the way home, I thought about Dylan. Maybe, somewhere on a distant construction site, he was starting over. Maybe he would stumble a few more times, or maybe he would learn something. I was no longer angry or curious about what he was doing. One late evening, while I was making edits to the project, I got a text from Vicky. "Kate, I heard Dylan left. I moved to a different job, too," she added. I texted back, "Good luck." Vicky added one more line. "Thanks for helping me see the light." I looked at the screen and smiled. Some wounds are not just your own. A week later, the project I was leading was approved. The director shook my hand in front of the whole department. "Kate, excellent work." I stood in the middle of the room, listening to the applause, and felt calm. That evening, we had dinner as a family. My father poured more water. My mom served me food. "Kate, have you thought about what's next?" my father asked. "Where? Maybe more school, or expanding your business." I thought about it. I used to think marriage was the obvious next step. Now I knew the next step could be whatever I chose. "I'll think about it," I replied. That night, I stood on the balcony, looking at the moonless sky. The city was still glowing with lights, still buzzing with noise, but there was an extraordinary silence in my soul. I remembered my question from that first day when Ann Peterson brought me to 901. "Mom, is this really the condo you prepared for us as our starter home?" That question had once stunned me. Now, I could smile at myself on that day, because if it weren't for that moment, I wouldn't have learned to stand up for my values, and I knew there was just one step left to close this story. Some stories don't end with a slammed door, but with an ordinary morning. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a long stripe across the floor. My mom was already up. I could hear the sizzle of oil in a pan from the kitchen. My dad was at the table, reading the newspaper as always. "Kate, you're awake," my mom called out. "Yeah." I sat down and took the glass of warm water my mom handed me. Looking at my parents, I suddenly felt a simple, complete happiness. There were no more late-night calls, no more threatening texts, no more Dylan spinning in my thoughts every time my phone vibrated. My father put down his paper and looked at me. "What are your plans for the weekend?" I thought for a moment. "I want to drive up to the countryside, visit Grandma and Grandpa." My mom looked up. "You haven't seen them in a while." "Yeah, I want to go." Maybe after everything that had happened, I needed that trip to truly find closure. That weekend, the whole family drove to the countryside. A narrow country road flanked by young green fields. The wind blew, carrying the familiar scent of damp earth. My grandma and grandpa smiled warmly when they saw me. "We hear our granddaughter has been very busy." I smiled. "Everything's okay now." In the afternoon, I sat in the garden under an old apple tree. Birds chirped in the branches. I replayed every stage I had been through: love, trust, doubt, exposure, confrontation, and finally, goodbye. If someone asked if it had hurt, I would say yes. But the pain hadn't broken me. It had only opened my eyes. That evening, as the family drank tea, my grandpa asked, "Kate, are you afraid of getting married now?" I laughed. "I'm not afraid of marriage. I'm afraid of choosing wrong." My grandpa nodded. "If you make a mistake, you fix it. The important thing is not to lose faith in yourself because of one mistake." Those simple words made me think for a long time. After returning to the city, I received a text from an unknown number. "Kate, I'm a colleague of Dylan's. He asked me to give you this." I arranged to meet the man in my office lobby. He handed me a small box. "Dylan asked me to pass this along. He said he didn't feel right contacting you." I opened it. Inside was the engagement ring. Looking at it that day, I no longer felt the shock I once had. It was just an object. I sent a single text to Dylan's old number. "I got it. This time," he replied, "it's up to you to keep it or throw it away. I don't have the right to say anymore." I looked at the screen for a few seconds and put my phone away. That night, I placed the ring in a different jewelry box. Not as a memento, but as a reminder that I had once made the wrong choice and had the courage to stop. A few months later, Lana gave birth. Michael called me, overjoyed. "Kate, everything's fine. Mom and baby are both healthy." I went to visit them at 901. The apartment was filled with the sound of a baby crying, which immediately quieted when he was held. Lana was in bed, tired but happy. "Kate, thank you," she said. "For what?" "If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have such a stable home." I looked at the tiny infant in Michael's arms and suddenly understood. This apartment, once the stage for a deceitful drama, was now the foundation for a real family. Life always finds a way to reward you. One afternoon, I received an email confirming I had been selected for a 6-month professional development program overseas. I read it over and over, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. That evening, I told my parents, "I want to go." My mom looked at me with a hint of worry. "So far away?" "It's only for 6 months, Mom." My father smiled. "Go. You need to broaden your horizons while you're young." I looked at them, grateful for their unwavering support. Before I left, I visited 901 one last time. Standing on the balcony, I remembered how I had first walked into this apartment, thinking I would soon be its mistress. If I hadn't been clear-headed that day, I might now be a woman living with doubt and exhaustion. I lightly touched the railing and whispered to myself, "Thank you for not staying silent." My phone vibrated. A text from Dylan. "Heard you're going abroad to study. Good luck." I looked at the screen and texted back, "Thanks." Nothing more. No reproaches, no regrets. Just two people who were once familiar, wishing each other well. On the day of my departure, my mom held my hand tightly at the airport. "Kate, take care of yourself," she said. "I will, Mom." My father patted my shoulder lightly. "My daughter is strong." I walked through security and turned back to look at them. In that moment, I realized the greatest thing I had saved through all of this wasn't Unit 901, or my job, or my reputation. It was myself. I had once asked, "Mom, is this really the condo you prepared for us as our starter home?" Now, I no longer needed anyone to prepare a home for me. I was building my own life. And if I ever got married, it would be because I wanted to, not because someone promised me something. The plane took off. The city shrank below a layer of white clouds. I closed my eyes and smiled. One chapter was closed, and I was starting a new one, without a shadow of lies, only the peace of a person who understood her true worth. Adapted Coda. Dear listeners, some stories show us not just a breakup, but an entire journey of growth. Kate's story isn't just about a betrayed woman. It's about a woman who knew when to stop. The most important part here isn't how Dylan deceived her, how he got into debt, or the price he paid. The most important part is that Kate did not stay silent. In life, many women, when faced with the truth, have a choice: close their eyes to save face, or confront it head-on to save themselves. Not everyone has the clarity to choose the second path, because the price of truth is always high. Kate chose the truth. She didn't rush into making a scene, didn't blame others, didn't fall into despair. She verified, observed, and stayed calm. She allowed the truth to reveal itself. That is the essence of strength. Strength isn't about shouting to be feared. It's about maintaining composure when your heart is breaking. What's the main takeaway? Never trade your self-respect for a wedding. Marriage is not a life raft for someone drowning in insecurities or ambition. Marriage is a partnership between two mature individuals. If one sees it as a way to change their life, and the other as a cozy home, the scales are unbalanced from the start. To everyone listening to this story, I want to say, don't be afraid to lose someone who doesn't respect you. Losing them isn't a loss, it's a rescue. As for Dylan, we shouldn't judge him too harshly either. Dylan was wrong because of greed, insecurity, and a desire to take shortcuts, but his story is also a cautionary tale for many men. If you can't stand firmly on your own 2 feet, you will always live in fear of being left behind. A real man doesn't look for a wife to save him from his failures. He saves himself before thinking about starting a family. For parents, this story is a reminder too. Don't rush your children into marriage just so they can settle down. Happiness doesn't come with age. It comes with the right partner. Forcing someone into a marriage without complete trust is like pushing them into a high-stakes gamble. Kate was lucky to have parents who knew when to step back and support their daughter when she decided to stop. Family should be a source of support, not pressure. And there's something deeper here. Kate didn't defeat Dylan. She defeated herself. Her fear of being alone. The pressure of society. The temptation to just look the other way. Someone might ask if Kate still believes in love after all this. I think she does. But it's a different kind of love now. The love of a person who understands that her value doesn't come from who chooses her, but from who she chooses. Every woman should have her own unit 901 inches her life. A moment of clarity. A moment when you realize, if I don't stand up for myself today, I will live with regret tomorrow. Dear friends, if you're in a relationship that makes you doubt yourself, pause for a moment. True love doesn't diminish you. It doesn't make you hide, constantly justify yourself, or sacrifice your dignity. True love brings peace. And if you're a man struggling with your ambitions, remember, you can build a career on hard work, but you can only build a family on honesty. Don't use marriage as a stepping stone for your insecurity. And if you're parents, please, don't measure your children's happiness by stability. Happiness comes from a well-chosen person, not a lavish wedding. I believe there are many Kates out there. Maybe they're suffering in silence. Maybe they're torn between staying and leaving. I hope today's story gives them a little bit of courage. The courage to verify. The courage to say no. The courage to believe they deserve better. If you have your own experiences, stories you can't share with anyone, don't hold them in for too long. Send your stories to our program. Every story is a life. Every life is a lesson. We're not here to judge. We're here to listen. Leave your comments. Share your thoughts on today's story. What would you have done in the heroine's place, discovering that the wedding condo was actually your own? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have faced the truth head on? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories. Stories not just for entertainment, but for self-reflection. Because sometimes, someone else's story becomes a mirror for our own lives. Goodbye, and until next time.